Ambassador Kale stood at the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching the human trading vessel dock with the same gentle precision it had shown for the past 3 cycles. The ship was called New Sol, and its crew had become familiar faces around the station. To Kale, they represented everything predictable about this new species that had joined galactic society. Humans were soft. That was his first and most lasting impression. Not physically soft, though they were certainly less imposing than the towering Vorthak or the armored Kelix. They were emotionally soft, mentally soft, culturally soft. They formed attachments to things and people with an intensity that other species found puzzling. They worried about individuals when logic demanded focus on the group. They made decisions based on feelings rather than pure calculation. Captain Wubin emerged from the airlock first, as always. He was a middle-aged human with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to smile even when his mouth was serious. Behind him came his usual crew. Do Hyun, the chief engineer, carried his toolkit and wore the same friendly expression he had shown for months. Su Jin, the systems specialist, nodded politely to the station workers who greeted her. They moved like people who had never known real danger, never faced true hardship. Kale had written 3 reports about humanity for the Vorthak Confederation. Each report reached the same conclusion. Humans were useful but harmless. They had decent technology, nothing revolutionary. They were excellent traders with a talent for finding solutions to mechanical problems. Their ships were well built but clearly designed for commerce rather than conflict. Most importantly, they showed no aggressive tendencies toward other species. The human homeworld, Earth, was apparently a peaceful place now. They had something called the United Earth Alliance that governed their species through discussion and voting, rather than conquest and dominance. Their colonies were small settlements focused on farming, mining, or research. Everything about them suggested a species that had evolved beyond the need for violence. Other alien species had reached similar conclusions. The Zalari Council classified humans as benign, traitors. The Corvin Empire listed them as low-priority contact. Even the usually suspicious Thrakari had designated humanity as monitored but non-threatening. Everyone agreed that humans were nice to have around, but would never be major players in galactic politics. Kale watched Captain Wubin direct his crew through their usual routines. They moved efficiently but without the sharp precision of a military unit. Do Hyun joked with Su Jin about something while they unloaded cargo containers. A few station workers joined their conversation, laughing at whatever story the engineer was telling. This was normal for humans. They seemed to make friends wherever they went. The cargo manifest showed typical human goods. Specialized electronics from their colonies, art objects from Earth, rare minerals from their mining operations, and food products that had become popular with several alien species. Nothing on the list suggested military applications. Nothing indicated hidden purposes. Just honest commerce from a species that seemed genuinely interested in peaceful trade. Kale decided to conduct one of his periodic informal interviews. He approached Captain Wubin as the human finished checking his cargo manifest. "Captain, a moment of your time?" Wubin looked up with that characteristic human smile. "Of course, Ambassador Kale, how can I help you? I am updating my files on human activities in this sector. How many ships does your species operate in this region?" "Oh, let me think." Wubin paused, counting on his fingers like a child. "I know of maybe 30 trading vessels that work the outer rim routes. Could be more. We don't exactly coordinate with each other unless there's a specific reason. 30 ships. That matched the numbers in Kale's records. A modest commercial presence that posed no threat to established trade routes. The captain's casual attitude about his own fleet size was typically human. Other species tracked every vessel with military precision. Humans seemed to operate on trust and informal agreements. "And your crew rotation schedule?" Kale continued. "We don't really have one," Wubin admitted. "Most of us have been together for over 2 years. Do Hyun and Su Jin signed on when I first got this ship. Taeho joined us about 18 months ago. We work well together, so why change?" This was another human peculiarity. Most species rotated crew members regularly to prevent the formation of personal loyalties that might interfere with orders. Humans did the opposite. They seemed to believe that personal relationships made them work better together. Kale had observed this pattern on every human vessel he had encountered. "Do you ever have conflicts with your crew members?" Kale asked. Wubin laughed, a sound that seemed genuinely amused rather than diplomatic. "Of course we do. Tae-ho and Soo-jin argue about engine maintenance procedures at least once a week. Do-hyun thinks my navigation choices are too cautious. But we talk things through. We're family now, family. Humans use that word to describe relationships that other species would classify as temporary work assignments. Kale had seen human crews refuse profitable assignments because it would mean leaving a crew member behind for medical treatment. He had watched them share resources equally, even when rank or contribution would justify different distributions. They formed emotional bonds that transcended logic. A commotion near the docking bay interrupted their conversation. Kale turned to see station workers helping someone on a stretcher. The injured person wore human clothing. Tae-ho, Captain Woobin shouted, running toward the stretcher. Kale followed, observing the human response to the emergency. Tae-ho had been injured in an accident while helping to repair a damaged alien freighter. The injury was serious but not life-threatening. He would need several days of medical treatment and weeks of recovery time. What happened next confirmed everything. Kale believed about human softness. Do-hyun immediately volunteered to donate blood for the transfusion. Even though human blood was valuable and difficult to replace in this part of space, Soo-jin canceled her shore leave plans to stay with Tae-ho during his surgery. Captain Woobin delayed their departure schedule indefinitely. Despite having a profitable cargo delivery deadline that would cost him significant credits. "Captain," Kyle said quietly, "your crew member will receive excellent medical care here. You could leave him to recover and return for him later. This delay will be expensive for you." Woobin looked at Kyle with an expression of genuine confusion. "Leave Tae-ho? He's crew. He's family. We don't leave family behind." The entire human crew stayed at the station for 6 days until Tae-ho could travel safely. They paid for the best medical treatment available, shared the cost equally among themselves, and spent their free time taking turns sitting with their injured crew member. Other alien species watched this behavior with the same puzzlement Kale felt. The Kellex captain, whose freighter had been involved in the accident, offered to compensate the humans for their delay. Captain Woobin refused payment, saying that helping others was simply what decent people did. The Kellex captain later told Kale that he found human logic completely incomprehensible. As Kale watched the humans care for their injured crew member, he finalized his assessment of their species. They were emotionally driven rather than logically focused. They prioritized individual welfare over group efficiency. They made decisions based on personal relationships rather than strategic advantage. They valued abstract concepts like loyalty and friendship over concrete benefits like profit and power. In his report to the Vorthak Confederation, Kale wrote his final conclusion about humanity. Species shows no aggressive tendencies or military capabilities. Emotional attachment to individuals makes them predictable and manageable. Recommend classification as harmless Category 7. Useful for trade relationships but incapable of significant political or military influence. No threat assessment necessary. The report was filed in the Confederation archives, marked as low priority, and essentially forgotten. Similar reports from dozens of other species reached identical conclusions. Across the galaxy, intelligence agencies and military commands noted humanity's existence and dismissed them as irrelevant to serious political calculations. None of them realized they had just made the greatest intelligence failure in galactic history. As the new Soul finally departed Nexus Station with Tae-ho safely aboard, Kale felt satisfied with his analysis. Humans were exactly what they appeared to be. Soft, emotional, harmless traders who posed no threat to anyone and would never be more than a minor footnote in galactic affairs. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. The alarm systems of Nexus Station had been screaming for 3 minutes when Kale realized this attack was different. The Scarix pirates had raided Outer Rim stations dozens of times before. They would arrive with overwhelming force, demand tribute, take what they wanted, and leave. Most species had learned it was cheaper to pay than fight these technologically superior raiders, but the humans were not paying. Captain Woobin stood in the station's command center, no longer the gentle trader Kale had observed for months. His kind eyes had turned cold and focused. His crew surrounded him and they moved with a precision that made Kale's spine crawl. These were not the same soft, emotional people he had cataloged in his reports. "Do-hyun, how long until you can get those mining lasers operational?" Woobin asked. "Give me 4 minutes, Captain," the engineer replied. His friendly demeanor had vanished completely. He worked at a control panel with mechanical efficiency that belonged on a military vessel, not a trading ship. Sujin, what's our communication status? I have direct links to every defensive position on the station, she answered, also patched into the Kelix freighter and the Thrakari merchant vessel. They're willing to follow our coordination. Kyle watched in growing confusion. When had the humans taken command of the station's defense? How did they know how to coordinate multiple alien vessels? Why were other species accepting human leadership without question? The main display showed 3 massive Scarix dreadnoughts approaching the station. Each ship was twice the size of the largest vessel currently docked. Their weapons could reduce Nexus Station to debris in minutes. Standard procedure was immediate surrender followed by negotiated tribute payments. Captain Wubin, Station Commander Velka said, his voice tight with fear. We should open communications with the raiders. We can negotiate reasonable terms. Wubin turned to look at the station commander. The human's expression was calm, but something in his eyes made the alien take a step backward. Commander, with respect, negotiation time is over, Wubin said quietly. They attacked a station with human civilians aboard. That changes everything. Kale felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. The human captain had not raised his voice or made any threatening gestures. But the absolute certainty in his words suggested that the Scarix raiders had made a fatal error in judgment. Du-Hyun status report, Wubin continued. Mining lasers are now weapons platforms. I've also rigged the cargo loading systems to fire metal containers at high velocity. Not pretty, but effective. Sujin, what about our ship? All systems online, Captain. Ready for combat operations. Combat operations. Kale stared at the humans in disbelief. Their trading vessel was preparing for combat against military dreadnoughts. It was suicide, but they discussed it as calmly as loading cargo. The Scarix fleet commander's voice crackled through the communication system. Nexus Station, you will prepare tribute of 50,000 credits and all rare metal reserves. You have 10 minutes to comply. Wubin picked up the communicator. Scarix vessels, this is Captain Wubin of the human trading ship New Soul. You have attacked a station with human civilians. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Laughter echoed from the speakers. Human, you are the soft traders we have heard about. Your threats are amusing. Pay tribute or be destroyed. Wubin set down the communicator and turned to his crew. You heard them. Tae-ho, take us out. Standard combat formation. Kale realized he was about to witness either the bravest or most foolish act he had ever seen. The human trading vessel undocked from the station and moved toward the 3 dreadnoughts. It looked like a small fish swimming toward 3 sharks. Then everything changed. The New Soul moved like no trading vessel Kale had ever observed. It accelerated past safe limits, turned sharper than its design should allow, and positioned itself in a flight pattern that made no sense for a cargo ship. The pilot, Hyojin, flew the vessel as if it had been built for combat rather than commerce. First volley incoming, Sujin reported calmly. The Scarix dreadnoughts opened fire with enough energy to vaporize a small moon, but the New Soul was not where the weapons targeted. Somehow the human pilot had predicted the attack pattern and moved the ship to safety before the enemy fired. Return fire, Wubin ordered. Kale's sensor readings exploded with impossible data. The human trading vessel was firing weapons that did not exist on any commercial ship design. Energy beams lanced out from hidden weapon ports, striking the lead dreadnought's shields with devastating accuracy. The weapons were not military grade, but they were far more powerful than anything a trading vessel should possess. How is this possible? Kale whispered. Du-Hyun overheard the question. Captain, should I explain our ship modifications to the ambassador? Not now, Do-Hyun. Focus on Target 2. The battle became a dance of death that lasted 6 hours. The human vessel moved through space like a living thing, avoiding destruction by margins so narrow that Kale's instruments could barely measure them. The Scarix dreadnoughts tried to use their superior firepower, but they could not hit a target that seemed to know where they would shoot before they decided to fire. More disturbing was how the humans fought. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. When the second dreadnought tried to target the station directly, Sujin volunteered to ram their ship into the enemy vessel to stop the attack. I can disable their main gun if I hit their forward section, she said matter-of-factly. It will probably destroy our ship, but the station will be safe. Wubin considered this proposal for exactly 3 seconds. Negative, Sujin. We'll find another way. But the fact that both humans had discussed suicide tactics as casually as discussing lunch plans made Kale realize he was witnessing something beyond his understanding. These were not the gentle traders he had observed. These were something else entirely. The tide of battle turned when Do-hyun managed to disable the lead dreadnought's shield generators, using a combination of mining lasers and improvised explosives. The human engineer had somehow calculated exactly how to overload alien defensive systems, using jury-rigged commercial equipment. Target is vulnerable, he reported. Recommend focused fire on sections C through F. The coordinated attack from the station's defensive systems and the new Soul punched through the dreadnought's armor like paper. The massive ship broke apart in a series of explosions that lit up the entire sector. The remaining 2 Scarix vessels tried to retreat, but the humans were not finished. Captain Wubin pursued them with relentless determination, harassing their withdrawal and preventing them from regrouping for another attack. Only when the enemy ships jumped to hyperspace did the new Soul return to the station. Kyle walked through the docking bay in a daze. The human ship showed battle damage that should have been fatal. Burn marks covered the hull, several weapon ports had been destroyed, and entire sections of armor plating were missing. But the vessel had survived a fight against 3 military dreadnoughts. The crew emerged from their ship, and Kale saw that the cost had been terrible. Tejo was dead, killed when a power surge overloaded his workstation. 2 other crew members were critically injured. Captain Wubin had burns on his hands and arms from manually operating damage controls, but they had won. Captain, Kale said quietly, how did you do this? How did a trading vessel defeat 3 military dreadnoughts? Wubin looked at him with eyes that held depths Kale had never noticed before. Ambassador, we did what we had to do to protect innocent people. That's what humans do. As the crew carried their dead and wounded to the medical bay, Kale realized his understanding of humanity had been completely wrong. These were not soft, harmless traders. They were something far more dangerous, something that had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. The gentle, emotional humans he had dismissed as harmless had just destroyed a pirate fleet that had terrorized the Outer Rim for months, and they had done it with a ship that was supposed to be designed for peaceful trade. Kale began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake in his assessment, but he did not yet realize how terrible that mistake truly was. 3 days after the battle, Kale could not sleep. The images of human combat efficiency haunted his thoughts. He had spent years studying species psychology and military capabilities. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he had witnessed aboard the new Soul. Dr. Young-soo had arrived with the human relief convoy, replacing the station's previous medical officer, who had been killed in the attack. The young human doctor worked with quiet competence, treating injured aliens and humans with equal care. But when Kale tried to understand how civilian traders had fought so effectively, the doctor's casual responses chilled him to the bone. Doctor, your people showed remarkable tactical knowledge during the battle, Kyle said carefully. Do all human traders receive military training? Young-soo looked up from his medical scanner, seeming genuinely surprised by the question. Military training? Not really, but every human learns basic survival skills growing up. You know, how to fight, how to organize defenses, how to work together under pressure. Standard stuff, standard stuff. Kale felt his throat tighten. And this training includes combat tactics? Oh, sure. Our history classes cover thousands of years of warfare. Strategy, logistics, weapons technology, battle psychology. It's educational, you know. Plus, most of us do mandatory service when we're young. Nothing serious, just learning how to defend our communities if needed. Kyle realized he was learning about a species that treated advanced military knowledge as basic education. When he asked about Earth's history, Dr. Young-soo spoke cheerfully about concepts that made other species sick with horror. The world wars were fascinating from a strategic perspective, the doctor explained while treating a Kellex patient. Total industrial warfare, global coordination, technological innovation driven by survival necessity. Really impressive what humans can accomplish when they're properly motivated. World wars, Kale repeated weakly. Oh yes, we had 2 major global conflicts in the 20th century. Tens of millions of casualties, entire continents turned into battlefields. Weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. Terrible time, but it taught us a lot about large-scale logistics and manufacturing. Kale felt dizzy. This cheerful young doctor was describing conflicts that dwarfed anything in recorded galactic history. Most species had never experienced warfare beyond small territorial disputes. Humans spoke of planet-wide destruction as a learning experience. How many wars has your species fought? he asked. Young-Soo paused, thinking, "Oh, that's hard to count. Thousands, probably. Major ones, anyway. If you include all the smaller conflicts, civil wars, regional disputes, and colonial actions, maybe tens of thousands. We keep pretty detailed records if you're interested in specific time periods. Tens of thousands of wars." Kale's people, the Vorthak, had fought exactly 3 conflicts in their recorded history, and those were considered traumatic cultural events that were still studied by sociologists. Humans had fought more wars than most species had years of recorded history. "But surely your people have evolved beyond such violence now," Kale said hopefully. "Oh, definitely. We're much more civilized now. Haven't had a major global war in almost 200 years. These days we mostly just have small conflicts, peacekeeping operations, anti-piracy actions, colonial defense situations. Nothing like the old days. Nothing like the old days." Kale realized that what humans considered peaceful was a level of military activity that would terrify most galactic species. Their idea of civilization still included regular warfare as a normal part of existence. Captain Minho arrived the next day with what humans called a relief convoy. Kale's sensors nearly overloaded trying to process what he was seeing. The ships looked identical to the peaceful trading vessels he had observed for years, but his instruments detected energy signatures that rivaled military dreadnoughts. "Captain Minho," Kyle said carefully, "your vessels show unusual power readings." The human captain smiled the same friendly smile that Kale had seen on dozens of other human faces. "Oh, that's just our standard configuration. All human ships are built to the same basic specifications. We just don't activate certain systems unless we need them." "What systems?" "Well, defensive shields, weapon arrays, enhanced engines, military-grade sensors, that sort of thing. Standard safety equipment, really. Space can be dangerous. Standard safety equipment." Kale was learning that human definitions of normal were completely different from every other species in the galaxy. What they considered basic safety measures were military capabilities that most species could not match with their best warships. "How many ships does humanity operate?" he asked. Minho scratched his head, thinking. "Active vessels? Maybe around 50,000 in this sector alone. Could be more. We don't really coordinate fleet movements unless there's a specific need. Each ship operates independently most of the time." 50,000 ships. In one sector. Kale had estimated the total human presence at maybe a few hundred vessels. If this sector alone had 50,000 ships, how many did they have in total? How had they hidden such massive numbers from galactic intelligence services? The population numbers were even more shocking. When Kale asked about human colony sizes, Minho gave him figures that made no sense. "Earth has about 12 billion people now," the captain said casually. "The colonies vary, but we're probably looking at another 20 billion spread across our settled worlds. Growing pretty fast, too. Humans like to have large families when resources allow. 32 billion humans. Most spacefaring species numbered in the hundreds of millions at most. The largest known galactic civilization, the Corvan Empire, had maybe 3 billion individuals across 40 worlds. Humanity had 10 times that number, and they were still expanding. How is such rapid expansion possible?" Kale asked. "Oh, we're good at terraforming and adapting to new environments. Plus, humans are pretty motivated to spread out and establish new communities. It's an old instinct, I guess. We like to make sure our species survives no matter what happens. Survival instinct." Kale was beginning to understand that humans approached existence with a paranoid determination that other species found incomprehensible. They built massive fleets and established dozens of colonies not for profit or convenience, but because they assumed catastrophic threats were inevitable. The most disturbing revelation came when engineer Kyung-Sik joined their conversation. The young human spoke about loss with a casual acceptance that horrified Kale. "My 3 brothers all died in service," Kyung-Sik mentioned while repairing a damaged bulkhead. Jin-Woo in an anti-piracy operation, Seung-Ho in a colony defense action, and Min-Sik in an industrial accident on Titan. "Dad always said that's the price of keeping civilization running. You lost 3 family members and you seem so calm about it," Kale observed. Kyung-Sik paused in his work, looking genuinely puzzled. "Well, yeah, death is part of life, especially when you're doing important work. They died protecting people and building something better for the next generation. That's what matters." This casual attitude toward death was universal among humans. They understood that survival required sacrifice, and they were prepared to pay that price without hesitation. Other species viewed death as a tragedy to be avoided at all costs. Humans saw it as an acceptable cost of achieving their objectives. Cale spent the next 2 days reviewing every piece of data he had collected about humanity over the past 3 years. When he analyzed it through his new understanding, a terrifying picture emerged. Humans had not been hiding their military capabilities through deception. They had been restraining themselves. Every human ship was a potential warship. Every human colony was a potential military base. Every human citizen was a potential soldier. They had built a galactic presence that could transform from peaceful commerce to total warfare in a matter of hours. The gentle, emotional humans he had dismissed as harmless were actually the most dangerous species in known space. They had evolved on a world where survival required constant warfare, and they had carried those instincts to the stars. Their emotional bonds were not weaknesses, but strategic advantages that allowed unprecedented cooperation under extreme stress. But most terrifying of all was their restraint. Humans possessed the capability to conquer the galaxy, but they chose not to use it. They preferred to trade, explore, and build rather than destroy and dominate. This restraint was not weakness, but strength of a kind that no other species had ever demonstrated. As Cale prepared his revised report for the Vorthok Confederation, his hands trembled slightly. He was about to inform his government that they had welcomed a species of warriors who had been pretending to be merchants. A species that could destroy galactic civilization if they chose to do so. The most frightening part was that humans seemed genuinely committed to peace. They fought only when attacked, protected other species from threats, and worked to build a better galaxy for everyone. But Cale now understood that this commitment was a choice, not a necessity. If humans ever decided that peace was not working, the galaxy would learn what 32 billion warriors could accomplish when they stopped pretending to be traitors. The universe was about to discover that it had been living next door to apex predators who had chosen to be vegetarians, and Cale was not sure that choice would last forever. The news of the Nexus Station battle traveled through communication networks at light speed. Within days, every major government in the galaxy had received reports about the human victory over the Scarix pirates. But Cale quickly realized that humans and aliens were interpreting the same events in completely different ways. The Galactic Council praised humanity for their brave defense of civilians. The Corvan Empire expressed interest in hiring human security services. The Thrakari Confederation offered to purchase human defensive technologies. Everyone saw it as an impressive, but isolated incident by a determined species, protecting their people. Humanity saw it as a declaration of war. Cale watched in growing alarm as human behavior across the sector began changing with mechanical precision. The casual, friendly traders he had observed for years were disappearing, replaced by focused individuals who moved with urgent purpose. Trading vessels started canceling commercial runs. Human civilians began relocating from outer rim colonies to more secure worlds. Most disturbing of all, ships began appearing on sensor networks that had never been detected before. Captain Minho, Kyle asked carefully, "Why are so many human vessels changing their flight patterns?" The captain looked up from a star chart he had been studying with unusual intensity. "Oh, we're just consolidating our assets. When someone attacks human civilians, we like to make sure our people are safe, and our resources are properly positioned." Positioned for what? Kyle wondered. But he was beginning to suspect he did not want to know the answer. The first sign of humanity's true capabilities came when Admiral Su Young arrived at Nexus Station. Her ship, the Incheon's Fury, made Cale question everything he thought he knew about human technology. The vessel was twice the size of a Scarix dreadnought and bristled with weapons that made his scanners overflow with energy readings. "Admiral," Cale said shakily, "I was not aware that humans possess ships of this class." Su Young smiled with the same friendly expression he had seen on dozens of human faces. But her eyes held depths that suggested she had seen things that would break most people's minds. "Oh, we have quite a few vessels like this one. We just don't usually bring them to civilian areas. No point in making people nervous with unnecessary displays of military hardware." Unnecessary displays. Cale stared at a warship that could probably destroy the combined fleets of 3 galactic governments, and the Admiral called it an unnecessary display. How many more ships like this did humanity possess? How had they managed to hide such massive military assets? "How long have you had ships of this capability?" he asked. The Incheon's Fury is about 15 years old, Su Young replied casually. She's actually scheduled for retirement soon. The newer ships are much more advanced, 15 years old and scheduled for retirement. This ship represented technology decades ahead of anything else in the galaxy, and humans considered it obsolete. Kale felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. What is the total size of the human fleet? He asked, dreading the answer. Su Young paused, apparently doing mental calculations. Active military vessels? Around 20,000, I think. Could be more. The different commands don't always coordinate their ship counts. Plus, we have maybe another 50,000 vessels that can be converted to military use if needed. 70,000 ships. Kale's species, the Vorthak, had exactly 43 military vessels, and those were considered a significant fleet by galactic standards. Humanity had more warships than the rest of the galaxy combined, and they had kept them completely hidden for years. Captain Hanul arrived with a squadron of human fighters, and Kale witnessed a demonstration that shattered his understanding of physical limitations. The small craft moved in perfect coordination, executing maneuvers that should have killed their pilots. They accelerated past safe limits, turned sharper than physics should allow, and maintained formation patterns that required inhuman precision. Captain Hanul, Kale said after watching the training exercise, "How do your pilots survive those acceleration forces?" Hanul removed her helmet, revealing a young woman who looked barely old enough for military service. "Oh, humans have pretty good tolerance for high-G maneuvers. We train from childhood to handle extreme physical stress. Plus, our ships have some enhancements that help with the more intense situations." "What kind of enhancements?" "Inertial dampeners, enhanced life support neural interface systems." Standard pilot gear, really. Nothing too fancy. Standard pilot gear. Kale was learning that human definitions of standard included technologies that other species had never imagined. Their fighter pilots routinely survived conditions that would kill alien pilots instantly. But the most shocking revelation came when Kale accessed human military databases with Admiral Su Young's permission. What he found challenged his understanding of space warfare itself. Human shipyards were massive beyond comprehension. Facilities that had been listed as commercial manufacturing centers were producing military vessels at impossible rates. A single human shipyard could build more warships in a year than most species possessed in total. How long would it take to fully mobilize the human fleet? Kale asked. Full mobilization? Su Young considered the question seriously. Maybe 6 weeks for complete deployment. 2 weeks if we skip some of the safety protocols. Of course, that would be for total war. We've never actually had to do it, total war. Humans had contingency plans for complete military mobilization that could happen faster than most species could organize a diplomatic conference. They had been preparing for galaxy-wide conflict while pretending to be peaceful traders. The scope of human military planning became clear when Kale reviewed their defensive positions. Planets he had thought were agricultural worlds were revealed to be fortress systems, with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Mining operations were actually military bases disguised as commercial ventures. Trade routes were strategic supply lines that could support massive military operations. "Admiral, how long have you been planning for large-scale warfare?" Kale asked. "Planning?" Su Young seemed confused by the question. "We're always planning for warfare. That's what military organizations do. We have contingency plans for every possible threat scenario. Invasion, rebellion, resource shortages, alien contact gone wrong, galaxy-wide conflicts. Standard stuff. Standard stuff." Humanity had been preparing for every possible form of galactic warfare, while other species assumed they were harmless traitors. They had built military capabilities that could conquer the known galaxy, and they treated it as routine preparation. Engineer Sangmin provided another disturbing insight into human thinking when he discussed their industrial capabilities. "If we need to switch from civilian to military production, most of our facilities can convert in a few days," he explained while repairing a damaged communications array. "We design everything with dual-use capabilities. A factory making civilian electronics can start producing military sensors with minimal modifications." "Why would you design civilian facilities for military production?" Kale asked. Sangmin looked at him with genuine confusion. "Why wouldn't you? It's just good planning. You never know when you might need to ramp up military production quickly. Better to be prepared than sorry. Better to be prepared than sorry." Humans had built their entire civilization around the assumption that warfare was inevitable. Every factory, every shipyard, every colony had been designed to support military operations if necessary. They had created a galaxy-wide infrastructure that could transform from peaceful commerce to total war in a matter of weeks. The most terrifying realization was that humans were still restraining themselves. All of these military capabilities, all of this planning and preparation, and they were still choosing to maintain peaceful relations with other species. They could conquer the galaxy tomorrow if they wanted to, but they preferred to trade and explore instead. But Kale now understood that this restraint was a choice, not a limitation. If humans ever decided that peace was not working, they possessed the military infrastructure to impose their will on every other species in known space. As he watched Admiral Su Young coordinate the movement of ships that could destroy planets, Kale realized that the galaxy had been living under human protection for years without knowing it. Humanity had the power to prevent or start any conflict they chose, and so far they had chosen to prevent them. The question that kept him awake at night was simple, but terrifying. How long would humanity continue to choose peace over conquest? And what would happen to the rest of the galaxy if they ever changed their minds? The sleeping giant was awakening, and Kale was not sure the universe was ready for what came next. Kale had expected humanity's response to the Scarix raid to be swift and decisive. What he witnessed instead was something that redefined his understanding of warfare itself. Other species typically negotiated with superior forces, paid tribute when threatened, or fought defensive battles when cornered. Humans declared the complete extinction of Scarix piracy to be their objective and began systematically hunting down every raider in known space. General Dongwook arrived at Nexus Station with a fleet that made Kale's sensors malfunction from data overload. 50 warships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, followed by support vessels, supply ships, and craft designed for purposes Kale could not identify. The general himself was a quiet man with gray hair and tired eyes who spoke about genocide as casually as others discussed the weather. Ambassador Kyle, Dongwook said during their first meeting, I understand you've been observing our species for some time. I wanted to explain what you're about to witness so there are no misunderstandings. General, surely a diplomatic solution can be reached with the Scarix. Most conflicts end with negotiated settlements. Dongwook smiled, and Kale felt his blood freeze. It was not a cruel smile or an angry one. It was the patient expression of someone explaining simple facts to a child. Ambassador, the Scarix attacked a station with human civilians aboard. They threatened our people and killed our friends. In human culture, that means they have forfeited their right to exist. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to ensure that Scarix piracy ends permanently. Permanently. Kale realized he was speaking with a military commander who intended to commit species-wide genocide and saw nothing unusual about that objective. When he tried to argue for restraint, the general's response chilled him to the bone. We tried restraint for 3 years, Ambassador. We played nice, traded fairly, respected everyone's customs and territories. And what happened? Pirates decided we were soft targets and attacked our people. Now they get to learn what happens when humans stop being nice. The campaign began immediately, and Kale quickly understood that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic military history. Human forces did not simply drive the pirates away from their territory. They tracked every Scarix vessel to its source, identified every base, every supply depot, every hidden asteroid facility. Within days, human intelligence operatives knew more about Scarix operations than the pirates knew about themselves. Commander Hai Wan led the assault troops with mechanical precision that turned warfare into a science. Her soldiers moved through space stations and asteroid bases like ghosts, appearing everywhere at once and leaving no survivors. But it was not random violence. Every strike was carefully planned to maximize psychological impact on remaining Scarix forces. Commander, Kale asked after watching footage of an assault on a pirate base, why do your forces leave no prisoners? Haywan looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death to count individual lives. Because prisoners can escape, be rescued, or traded for concessions. Dead pirates cannot continue pirating. It's simple mathematics, simple mathematics. Humans had reduced warfare to a mathematical problem where the only acceptable solution was the complete elimination of enemy forces. They were not fighting to win battles or control territory. They were fighting to ensure their enemies could never threaten anyone again. The efficiency was terrifying. Supply Officer Jae-min coordinated logistics with computer-like precision, ensuring that human forces could maintain their campaign indefinitely. Fuel, ammunition, food, replacement parts, medical supplies, and reinforcements flowed through supply lines that stretched across the galaxy. The humans could fight forever if necessary. Intelligence operative Yunji seemed to know everything about Scarex's operations before the pirates themselves made decisions. She provided target lists, movement predictions, and tactical assessments with uncanny accuracy. When Kale asked how she obtained such detailed information, her answer made him question everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. "Oh, we've been monitoring all criminal organizations in this sector for years," she said casually. "Standard intelligence gathering. We like to know who might threaten our people or our interests." Standard intelligence gathering. Humans had been conducting galaxy-wide surveillance operations while pretending to be harmless traders. They knew the locations, capabilities, and plans of every criminal organization in known space, and they had been quietly watching and waiting for an excuse to act. But the true horror of human warfare became clear when they discovered that the Scareks had been selling captured civilians into slavery. The human response was immediate and absolute. Every slave market, every transport captain, every individual who had profited from the trade became a target for elimination. "General," Kale protested after reviewing the expanded target list, "some of these people were just buyers. They didn't capture the slaves themselves." Dongwook looked at him with the patience of someone explaining basic morality to a sociopath. "Ambassador, slavery is a crime against sentience itself. Anyone who participates in that trade has chosen to forfeit their right to existence. We will find them all and we will kill them all. This is not negotiable." The hunt expanded across 3 sectors as human forces tracked down every individual connected to the slave trade. Pilot Boram's squadron destroyed 3 entire fleets in a single day, using tactics that turned space combat into an art form. Her pilots moved through enemy formations like sharks through schools of fish, killing with precision that bordered on supernatural. "How do your pilots achieve such accuracy?" Kale asked after watching combat footage that showed impossible shot placement. "Training," Boram replied simply. "We start learning combat skills as children. By the time we reach military service, shooting accurately is as natural as breathing. Plus our targeting systems are pretty good." Pretty good. Human targeting systems were so advanced that their pilots could hit specific components on enemy ships from distances that made visual targeting impossible. They fought battles in 3 dimensions across thousands of kilometers with precision that made warfare look choreographed. But the most disturbing aspect of the campaign was how humans treated their enemies. They showed no anger, no hatred, no desire for revenge. They killed Scarex's pirates with the same emotional detachment they might use to exterminate insects. It was not personal, it was simply necessary. "Do your people feel any regret about this extermination campaign?" Kale asked General Dongwook as they reviewed casualty reports. "Regret?" The general seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. "Ambassador, we regret that it was necessary. We regret that the Scareks chose to threaten innocent people, but regret for stopping them? No, protecting our people and our allies is what we exist to do." Kyle realized he was witnessing a species that had weaponized their protective instincts. Humans did not fight for conquest, glory, or resources. They fought to eliminate threats to things they cared about. And once they identified something as a threat, they would pursue its destruction with relentless determination until the threat no longer existed. The campaign lasted 6 months and ended with the complete extinction of Scarex's piracy as an organized force. The few survivors had fled to unmapped regions of space, carrying stories that would become legends among criminals throughout the galaxy. No pirate organization would ever again consider targeting humans or stations under human protection. But Kyle understood that the galaxy had just witnessed something far more significant than an anti-piracy operation. Humanity had demonstrated their ability to coordinate military actions across multiple sectors, maintain supply lines over impossible distances, and execute complex campaigns with perfect precision. They had shown that they could find anyone, anywhere, and eliminate them if they chose to do so. Most terrifying of all was the speed and efficiency of the transition back to peaceful operations. Within weeks of the last Scarek ship being destroyed, human military assets began disappearing from sensor networks. Warships returned to hidden bases, assault troops resumed civilian occupations, and trading vessels reappeared on commercial routes as if nothing had happened. "General," Kyle asked during their final meeting, What happens to your military forces now? Dongwook smiled that patient smile again. They go back to their regular lives, Ambassador. Most of our military personnel are civilians who serve when needed and return to normal occupations when the crisis ends. It's more efficient that way. More efficient. Humans had created a military system where their entire civilian population could transform into soldiers when necessary, then return to peaceful lives when the threat was eliminated. They had turned their whole species into a reserve military force that could mobilize instantly and disappear just as quickly. As Kale watched the last human warships depart Nexus Station, he realized that the galaxy had been permanently changed. Every criminal organization, every potential aggressor, every species considering military action would now have to factor in the possibility of human intervention. The message was clear: threaten human interests or human allies and face complete annihilation. Humanity had not just defeated the Scarix pirates, they had established themselves as the galaxy's ultimate arbiters of acceptable. 6 months after the first attack on Nexus Station, the galaxy was a different place. The Scarix pirates had ceased to exist as an organized force, their last remnants scattered to the unmapped regions of space, carrying whispered stories of human wrath. But the end of the campaign revealed something that disturbed Kale more than the warfare itself: humanity's terrifying discipline. Admiral Su Young could have continued the hunt. Her fleet possessed the firepower to eliminate every criminal organization in 3 sectors. Human intelligence networks had identified dozens of pirate groups, smuggling rings and slave traders that could be destroyed with minimal effort. The infrastructure was in place, the forces were available, and the galaxy would have been grateful for the service. Instead, she stopped. "Admiral?" Kale asked during their final meeting. "Your forces could easily eliminate the remaining criminal organizations in this region. Why are you withdrawing?" Su Young looked at him with those deep, tired eyes that suggested she had seen things that would break lesser minds. "Because that was not our objective, Ambassador. We came to eliminate the Scarix threat. That threat no longer exists." Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Humans had demonstrated the ability to coordinate galaxy-wide military operations, but they possessed the discipline to stop when their specific objective was achieved. They were not conquerors driven by ambition or greed. They were problem solvers who eliminated threats and returned to their regular lives. The transformation back to peaceful operations was almost as impressive as the military campaign itself. Within weeks, the massive fleets that had terrorized pirate strongholds across 3 sectors simply vanished. Warships returned to hidden bases that did not officially exist. Assault troops resumed their civilian jobs as if they had never spent months eliminating organized crime rings. Supply networks that had supported impossible military logistics dissolved back into normal commercial operations. Kale watched the process with growing amazement. Engineer Sang Min, who had spent 6 months coordinating the destruction of pirate facilities, returned to his job maintaining civilian trading vessels. He spoke about the transition with the same casual tone he might use to discuss changing shifts at a factory. "It feels good to get back to normal work," Sang Min said while repairing a damaged cargo loader. "Military operations are necessary sometimes, but I prefer building things to destroying them." Most humans do. Most humans preferred building to destroying, but they were devastatingly efficient at both. Kale realized he was observing a species that could switch between creation and annihilation as easily as changing clothes. They had spent 3 years building peaceful relationships with dozens of alien species, then spent 6 months destroying their enemies, and now they were returning to construction projects as if nothing unusual had happened. Captain Minho summarized the human perspective with typical casual precision during one of their conversations. "We don't fight because we want to, Ambassador. We fight because we're good at it. And sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what matters. But fighting is just a tool like any other. You use it when you need it, then put it away when the job is done." A tool. Humans had turned warfare into a precision instrument that they could deploy and withdraw with mechanical efficiency. They did not glorify violence or seek conquest for its own sake. They simply eliminated problems that threatened their interests, then returned to their preferred activities of exploration, trade, and construction. But Kale understood that the galaxy had been permanently changed by what they had witnessed. Every government, every military command, every criminal organization now knew that humanity possessed capabilities that dwarfed anything previously imagined. The gentle traders who had spent years building peaceful relationships were also warriors who could destroy civilizations if they chose to do so. The political implications were staggering. Species that had dismissed humans as irrelevant were now sending diplomatic missions to establish formal alliances. Governments that had ignored human trade proposals were suddenly offering exclusive agreements and territorial concessions. Everyone wanted to be on humanity's good side, because being on their bad side meant extinction. Dr. Young-Soo provided another insight into human thinking when Kale asked about their long-term plans for the galaxy. Plans? The doctor seemed genuinely confused by the question. We're not planning to rule the galaxy, if that's what you're asking. We just want to live our lives, explore new worlds, trade with interesting species, and raise our families in peace. Same as always. Same as always. Humans had demonstrated the ability to conquer the known galaxy, but they wanted the same things they had always wanted: peaceful commerce, scientific discovery, and the freedom to build their own communities. They were not megalomaniacs seeking universal domination. They were ordinary people who happened to be extraordinarily dangerous when threatened. This restraint was perhaps their most terrifying characteristic. Any other species with such overwhelming military superiority would have used it to establish an empire. Humans used it to eliminate specific threats, then returned to their peaceful activities. They possessed the power of gods, but retained the interests of merchants and explorers. Kale's final report to the Vorthak Confederation was the most difficult document he had ever written. How could he explain that humanity had revealed itself to be the most dangerous species in galactic history, while simultaneously demonstrating that they had no interest in using that danger for conquest? Species assessment. Humanity represents unprecedented military capabilities combined with disciplined restraint, he wrote. They possess the technological and organizational capacity to dominate galactic civilization, but show no interest in doing so. Recommend immediate alliance negotiations and complete compliance with human requests for peaceful cooperation. He paused before adding his final conclusion. The galaxy now exists under human protection whether we acknowledge it or not. They have chosen to allow other species to maintain independence and self-governance. This choice should be respected and supported by all civilized governments. As Kale transmitted his report and prepared to leave Nexus Station, he reflected on everything he had learned about humanity over the past months. They were not the soft, emotional traders he had initially dismissed. They were also not the conquering empire that their military capabilities could have supported. They were something entirely new in galactic history. A species that had evolved the capacity for unlimited warfare, but chosen to use that capacity only for protection rather than expansion. They were apex predators who had decided to be gardeners, warriors who preferred to be builders, destroyers who chose to be creators. Engineer Sang-min provided the perfect summary during their farewell conversation. The universe is big enough for everyone, Ambassador. We don't need to own it all. We just need to make sure the parts we care about stay safe. The parts they cared about included not just human colonies and trading routes, but apparently any civilized species that chose to cooperate rather than threaten. Humanity had appointed itself as the galaxy's protector, and they possessed the power to enforce that protection against any conceivable threat. As Kale departed Nexus Station aboard a Vorthak diplomatic vessel, he looked back at the trading ships and civilian facilities that had hidden one of the most powerful military forces in galactic history. The humans were back to their normal activities, loading cargo and planning exploration missions as if they had never spent 6 months systematically destroying their enemies. But now everyone knew the truth. The gentle traders were also unstoppable warriors. The peaceful explorers were also efficient killers. The species that built beautiful colonies and conducted profitable commerce could also coordinate military campaigns that spanned multiple sectors and eliminated entire criminal organizations. In his personal log, Kale wrote the words that would become the unofficial motto of the new galactic order. When I saw humans fight, I knew the universe was theirs to claim. The greatest mercy in galactic history is that they have chosen to share it instead. The sleeping giant had awakened, demonstrated its power, and returned to its peaceful slumber. But now it slept with one eye open, watching over a galaxy that had learned to be very grateful for its protection. Humanity had claimed the universe not through conquest, but through the terrifying restraint that came from knowing they could conquer it any time they chose. and everyone else lived under the umbrella of that choice, hoping it would never change. The new order had begun. It was an order built not on human dominance, but on the galaxy's collective understanding that challenging humanity's interests was a form of elaborate suicide. Peace would continue as long as everyone remembered that simple fact, and Kale suspected that everyone would remember it for a very long time.